resource center. But this just doesn't happen. What did your mom and dad do for a living? Were they social services?
No, my dad, actually managed a dry cleaning business for a lot of years. It was called Shades Deluxe Cleaners.
Sure.
Remember that?
I do.
And then later on, he opened a carpet cleaning business, office cleaning, which I helped with. And then his brother, when his brother passed away, he opened a bar, Smokey's Bar. So he was always kind of a business. You know, my mom was basically a homemaker. She stayed home. So, and I just kind of remember, you know, when you're getting to the end of high school and kind of thinking what you want to do. I always kind of felt like I wanted to do something, human services, something to help other people. So I went to JCC and was in the human service program. And one of the things they assigned me to was to help out in a class, a special education class. And it was actually there's a church in Lakewood, still there. They had a section of that church. And there was some younger kids. They were elementary, first, second. And they ran a special education class. And I believe, it's a long time, that John Hamels was the teacher. I think you guys know who John Hamels is. And I assisted, and that kind of said, yeah, this is something I like. This is something I'd want to do. So after JCC, I enrolled at SUNY Geneseo in the special ed program. So I graduated with a degree in special ed. And after going through the student teaching that, I'm like, I don't know. Just wasn't sure if the teaching was the part that I wanted to do. So when I graduated in May, and I worked with my dad's carpet cleaning business. Went out, did carpet cleaning, and did that, and somehow thought, well, I should apply for the resource center, and I did, and didn't hear anything for a while, and in September that year, I was hired at Pardee Avenue Group Home. It just opened, just newly opened. When I started, not everybody that was going to live there was there yet. New staff coming in, and it actually was the managers were the live-in. They were still doing live-in managers. So there was a couple that were the managers. They had an apartment in the home, and that was where they lived. They got room and board, and then new staff. And I was, even though I had that background in special ed, first couple of days I don't know. But, and I just stayed, and it just kind of, I got to know the men and the women that lived there. I got to develop some rapport, and people who would come out of the developmental center. So it just kind of grew on me, and I know I was there about a year, and then there was, I'd applied for some other jobs because I was going to get married, and I needed to make a little more money. So there was a point where I was going to go back and help my dad's business. So Bruce Piatz was director of residential at the time. So I went into Bruce. I said, I think I'm going to have to leave. He goes, yeah, I know. I said, how do you know? He says, yeah, you got that job at Day Treatment. I said, I did? Well, nobody told me I got the job at Day Treatment.
Really?
So they had told him that we were going to hire Mark. But I said, well, then I might say. So I moved to the Day Treatment program, which had, I don't know, this is answering the one question. Am I going like?
No, it's great. Keep going.
Okay.
We'll stop you.
Okay, all right. So started at the Day Treatment program. It was like a programming specialist. So I was supposed to have a group that I worked with, kind of develop some programming. I used to do a lot of grooming with the guys, like we'd work on shaving and hand washing and, toileting, and so I did that as well as doing some programming. So something I enjoyed doing, and we had a very small program at the time, and about 55 people. A lot of came from their homes, their family care homes, and it was in 1982 when Foot Avenue ICF was opening. So I remember we were all in anticipation of soon we're going to have 60 more people coming here. And people that had been in institution for a long time and had some severe deficits and behavioral challenges. So it was kind of, we were kind of anxious. And then finally, we kind of got delayed for some reason, but then all the, individuals started to come in, groups at a time. And I remember, there was a lot of involvement with the state, and there was a consumer, and that was a lot of involvement with the state because of the movement with caseworkers. And I remember one person saying, we're sitting around, well, you have to develop behavioral objectives you have to have 3 behavioral objectives. And I go, oh, yeah, I know how to do this. I went to school for this. So then that became how to set these objectives, these goals for 60 people. They all had to have 3. So I was a big part of that because, fortunately, I had that background in the special education, so that helped me.
As all this is being developed and you're out in the community and people say, Mark, where do you work? And your response is probably at the time the Achievement Center. Is that what it was known then?
Oh, that's a good question.
Anyway, for our purposes, because there were some name changes.
Chautauqua County. I thought it was the Chautauqua County Resource Center. They had that Chautauqua County.
Then we dropped Chautauqua County.
Yeah, at that
So
time.
let's just say the Resource Center. And what was the community reaction in the early days, to the Resource Center, the assisting, then the term was mentally retarded, now developmentally disabled? Did you get a sense of the community reaction of having client base?
Kind of different phases. I mean, when I was working in the, at that time called group home, IRA now, you would get strange looks when taking people out to store or the movie theater, or some glances and sometimes some comments. I think there was a little bit of people not knowing what was happening, or not knowing what was going on. I don't know how much came out in the community as far as, at that point I wasn't involved in that, as far as opening a new home. And later on I was involved in Celeron. I was hired as administrator, so. Mm-hmm. And that was a little more extreme because the behavior is more extreme, so the reactions were, I know we had to deal with, the mall management at time when, so, there was some concerns. And obviously later on I was involved with opening new homes, and we always had those difficult times from the neighbors that, it was fine that you were, putting a home in, but not where I live,
NIMBY,
yeah, right, not my backyard. So I think it was, the most pushback that I saw was when a home moved in. Other than that, it was, things would happen, people would question it, but I think, and I've seen over time that we've become more accepted. People have more understanding. People appreciate the resource center now. I think it just, as they've seen, people have seen when a home goes in, there's not a problem, you know. That the people who receive service from Resource Center are good neighbors. So I think we've grown to actually be appreciated. And there are some people, I'm sure, maybe that aren't too happy, but I think it was it just took time.
Thank God for the Padavan bill,
Yep.
which
Right.
assisted the zoning
Right.
aspect
Right.
of placement of group homes.
Yep. Went through that process quite a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, you and I, and we'd go to those public hearings, and you'd start with 100 people, and then second public hearing, 50. By the time they were going to vote, maybe 5 people show up, and it passed.
Yeah.
And you had to make your case.
Now, I won't name any name, but it was a home we were putting in to kind of my neighborhood, and at that time the DDSO was, you should contact neighbors ahead of time before. This is a good, so I did that, and these were people I knew, and it did not go well. I mean, I got a pretty nasty letter from one person, and we had a hearing at the Holy Trinity Church that was kind of ugly.
Yep.
So that was like, okay, yeah, I followed the advice. But we went through the hearing and had the commissioner's hearing, and, obviously we're at that home now, so.
That was a time of great growth, wise. And did you have any reason to go out to Jay and Adams or Willowbrook, or to see the source of where the residents were coming from?
Well, when we opened, when I was hired for, it was a cellar on A, cellar on B, Chandler ICF, 39 beds, 38 were for Willowbrook. I made numerous trips to, they had changed it, it was called Staten Island Developmental Center then, it wasn't Willowbrook, but it was the building that was Willowbrook. So we had to go down and kind of see people that live there and kind of, make a kind of a selection process, I guess. Get some information and see how placement would go. So that was quite an experience. Yeah, I remember the meetings and the staff at the meetings, and every time you asked about someone, well, I'm new, I haven't worked with that person very long. That was kind of a typical, so you didn't get a lot of information, but we kind of did the best we could, and that's where the Consumer Advisory Board was played a big part, who represented Willowbrook class clients, and I remember, some of the individuals had actually gone to specialty hospitals. It's Flowers Fifth Hospital, so they were like in a hospital setting. And we're at these meetings, and they're pushing, like, got to get people out in the community. We had an in-house program, and talking about people that hadn't been, so it was a struggle. And then training became an issue, and at one point when we were going to open, we had to send a group of staff down to Staten Island Development Center and the Flowers Fifth Hospital to get training, because they were holding it up. They didn't know we were ready. And then the day came that planes landed at the Jamestown Airport. Staff went out to pick individuals up who were in wheelchairs, some in carts. And the staff turned around and plane, and now it's us. And we had never really cared for individuals that severely disabled with the medical, with the feeding tubes and the positioning, and so that was very difficult. They did send a person. I believe her name was Karen Green. She was very helpful. She spent a lot of time there to help us, and it was pretty kind of amazing, really, that we did it.
Yeah.
You know, that the homes are still running. Some of the people that many years ago are still alive. I mean, it was. I would believe it was an amazing accomplishment to take that on. But you know, the Resource Center did it and succeeded, and I'm glad I was a part of it.
The Willowbrook decree and all of that came in the mid-'70s. We had at the Resource Center an executive director by the name of Michael Raymond,
All right.
who, there was a sense anyways that he caught the wave. Was that a sense that you had as a staff member of Michael?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah. I mean, plus things I heard, you know, that he knew, he had the contacts, he knew where to get the dollars, the funding, and he had that ability to reach out. And what I don't know if he had developed previously before he developed contacts that he knew how to do it. Yeah, so I had a sense that he caught the wave, or he knew what was going on.
Yeah, again, I was part of that, and his mind went a million miles. But he was essentially writing the regulations and the programs and getting the funding for those that which he wrote, because he had the eyes and ears of the state.
Right.
And then it was up to you, and I mean, you being representative of the staff, saying, all right,
Me
now
and, yeah.
you got to do it,
Mm-hmm.
implement it.
Yep.
In your sphere, who did you report to?
As far as this, when I was administrator for the Celeron,
Yeah.
it was Clark
Clark.
Appleton, yeah.
So was Mike there then, or was?
He was there, yeah.
yeah.
He was there.
Did you have much interaction with him at all?
No, not much.
So your go-to guy was Clark.
My go-to guy was Clark, yep.
So you and Clark go together out to Willowbrook and places?
Clark was on the trips, yeah.
Yeah.
We had a social worker, Glenn Piper at the time, nursing person, you know, so we had the groups that would go out.
When we talked to Clark and he was talking about those trips, he was pretty emotional. Pretty emotional
Yeah,
about that.
it was, yeah. I mean, you walk those halls and you just think it wasn't the same, but you just had the feel of just how awful it was.
Yeah. This is, again, from the observation of workers in your position. You're dealing with tough situations. Tough situations. How does a Mark Morton keep his sense of humor?
Well, I was always able to maintain a sense of humor. I just, you know, all the people worked together, we worked hard, and we did our best, but, you know, we would laugh. But, you know, we just enjoyed working together and try to have fun sometimes, you know, just, you know, I don't know, it's just something I guess was always, wherever I worked, there was always a good spirit of camaraderie and staff getting along, and we would, you know, people would joke and we would laugh, and, you know, it was okay. It was serious, but it was okay to laugh. It was okay to have fun, you know. I mean, in my role, I would encourage it, like, yeah, sure, you know.
You had the opening of 3 new ICF, Celeron A, Celeron B, Chandler. And again, go time periods. It seemingly there was constant construction, constantly new program.
Right.
And I suspect from your perspective, changing programs because there was no playbook. I mean, there was a Willowbrook decree, there was a master, and to make sure that they got deinstitutionalized.
Right.
And we were one of the venues, if not the principal venue in the state
Mm-hmm.
for this happening. Did you get a sense the state kind of knew what they were doing, or were they learning it as they were going along?
They were kind of learning as it goes along. Yeah. There was a lot of, contradict sometimes. One thing said, another thing said, and I mean, yeah, I don't think, they were given the same, this is what we need to do. And I think they tried their best, but, the people that we dealt with, I don't know if I always got the, consistent instructions too. So, I think it was just a time of turmoil, and everybody's trying to do their best to get things done, and maybe not with always the clearest of instruction done, so.
Well, you're being the position you're in, you're sort of the guy that has to interpret that instruction from the state because you're living it.
Right.
You're on the ground, they're not. Did that get contentious?
Yeah. I mean, the Consumer Advisory Board they were very difficult. They were very demanding. We were, someone would get sick. Everything was questioned. That was their role, I guess. That was their role so. And then you had, the DDSO kind of, in the middle there. They're wanting to make the Consumer Advisory Board happy, so they're pushing us too, and so they're being political. Obviously, they have to play their politics. Everybody got their role, has a role, but here we are. We're the ones taking care of the individuals, and initially with not a lot of experience doing that, so.
Right.
But we got good at it.
And you did. And did other entities throughout the state look to a Mark Morton and company for guidance? Did you find yourself being asked to tell them what you're doing, the best practices?
No, not really. I don't know if anyone else was doing what, as far as like, individuals from Willowbrook. I don't know if anyone was really dealing with that
Population.
population. Yeah.
Oh, it was, well, it was remarkable that you were in the eye of the storm, Mark. You had the capacities, skill sets to successfully pull off what was something made out of whole cloth. And that wasn't lost to those who were a little bit more removed, but you were talked about a lot.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. And it may be long after the fact, but here we are.
Yeah.
At some point, Mike leaves, and then short period of time, Sam Restivo's the interim,
Right.
and then Paul comes in. Now, did the management styles change? The kind of the direct interaction, were they different? Could you feel that?
It was different.
Yeah.
I know there was Michael Raymer was the person who, the developer, got the program started, and then was more, let's move on to the next development. Where Paul was more on, let's take care of what we have too. I mean, let's, be involved in the programs that we have, and so you definitely felt that I had more interaction with Paul than I ever did with Michael. So
For years, you were, as the residential services director, you were involved in maintenance, transportation, human resources. I'll focus a little bit on transportation. At some point, we were leasing out, we were renting, and then all of a sudden, we decided to do it in-house. Was that under your, do you remember that?
that was before my involvement with maintenance transportation was toward the end of my career. So that had already taken place.
Already taken place. Because that was a big decision. Because we were renting, lease payments, and somebody had to decide, wouldn't it be better if we just bought them and ran a fleet? And that was running outside the box. And I don't know, Steve, do you remember who that kind of? I remember creating the entities, and I remember that, but I don't know how that all happened. Then you get yourself into human relations, contract negotiations.
Yep, human resources, yep.
Yep. A union. Heretofore, of the healthcare facilities in Chautauqua County, Lutheran, WCA, Heritage Resource Center, none of them had unions. And do you remember when all of a sudden there was a petition and they probably came to Paul and said, hey, we would like to organize?
Yes, I remember. I mean, I believe there were 2 attempts previous to the one that was successful, so it was something that had been going on. Two that did not go through before the third one did.
Right. As you were in, of course, in administrative staff at that point, I mean, you're at the kitchen cabinet with Paul. What were the conversations going on? Because where yes, a couple have been defeated, as they had other health organizations been defeated. All of a sudden, I think this was probably one of the first, if not the first, health organization in the area which had a union. Do you remember the conversations of, now what?
Well, obviously, it wasn't wanted, the union. I mean, there was discussion about how it would be better if there wasn't. We had talking points that, we could kind of relay. I mean, you have to be careful. We couldn't, do a whole lot as far as the staff. I just remember just talking to, staff, like, we know this is going on, but as far as we're concerned here, we need to do the work of caring for the people that live here. That still has to be number one.
Right.
This other thing, in talking to them, I had, it's, something you have to take the information and decide. But we have to not we can't let it interfere with the job that we have to do.
I'm envisioning Marty Idzik of our office at Phillips Lytle, coming and handing you a sheet which says do's and don'ts.
Yep,
And
I recall that.
and I could probably find the sheet. And the same sheet he used when he helped out the other healthcare organizations. Right. The vote comes back, and the vote is in favor of formation of a union. Do you remember the immediate reaction of the staff?
Well, there are a lot of staff that didn't want a union. And then, I don't know that first time the number of people that voted, but I know typically the votes are small, so it's people that really want the union that vote, and then the ones that don't do anything, and all of a sudden, now they have a union. So,
Yeah. First contract, were you part of the team?
no, I wasn't at that time.
Because that's always the toughest.
Yeah. No, I wasn't. I wasn't in the HR at that time, so I know I wasn't part of the.
Yeah. Although you inherited that
Mm-hmm.
contract. And can you gauge that part of your work experience at the resource center? Because you took over after Tony Prinzi retired, right?
Well, yeah, I took Tony's job, yeah, his position, yeah,
Yeah.
and then then Nikki left, so then it was, yeah, so
So you're the guy.
I was the guy for.
So grievances and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a challenge?
Yeah, of course.
That wasn't your background. I mean, that's not special education.
No, not special education. Yeah, it was a challenge. To be honest, looking over the 41 years of my career, probably wasn't the most favorite thing that I did. But, everything I did, I took something from it, and, So, I mean,
Well, one of the nice things that Steve gave me a little background on you, Mark, that you were the Cracker Jack player for the Resource Center basketball team. Now, can you? I honestly don't remember.
I don't know about that, the Cracker Jack player, but I played.
Tell me about it, because I drew a complete blank, and I thought I had a sense of a little bit of everything at the Resource Center.
I mean, this is what all I recall is we had a group. I think kind of came out of maybe more of the day program, day treatment staff. We got together and we played basketball. I know we found some gyms, Salvation Army, and then the idea come up. Well, let's see if we can play some other teams. Okay. So I remember we played the Jamestown Police Department had a team, and I think GA Home had a team. So there were other agencies that had teams, and we would just kind of get together, and then some of the staff and individuals at the home would come and watch. And I think the highlight of our existence was being at JCC Gymnasium playing the Lady Jayhawks. That was, I recall that game, and I recall that the court seemed larger than the other ones were, so you were getting out of breath. Yeah, so it was fun. It was enjoyable.
Do I dare ask the score?
We lost. I don't know the score, but I'm pretty sure we lost.
Who else are some of the players? Remember?
Joe DiCarlo was a player. I think Jane Young played, maybe. She was in. I remember a picture I saw recently. She was on. And a lot of staff that weren't really there that long afterward. I think maybe Art Volks played, and I don't know. Was there? That's all I can remember right offhand.
Did you ever have to kind of go to Albany and sort of deal with state officials? Did you find yourself in any of those various roles you had interfacing, so that you had to go and, as a result of an audit or budgetary constraints, or kind of get in a plane and or car and go to Albany?
Occasionally.
Yeah.
I think my most experience dealing with state officials when I was at the Foote Avenue ICF, and we were going through the intermediate sanctions, and they were there quite often, monitoring, and so I had quite a bit of dealings with pretty high levels in the Bureau program certification and that compliance units and.
That was a 60-bed facility, right? Owned by, I remember land lease, Battler, Brew Bar,
Right.
Bruce and Barbara Battler. And then, because that was kind of out of whole cloth, and what I vaguely remember is the first time we tried to get started, there was a number of deficiencies. And, you know, you basically didn't even know what the standard was, let alone
Right.
if there was a deficiency. But was that tough where somebody just sort of, you know, we're making up regs, and by the way, now here's the regs we just made up and you're deficient?
I don't know, but it was brutal.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, it just seemed like he would correct a number of things, and the next time it was different things, or it just wasn't right. It just, you know, and I felt for the staff because, you know, to have being looked at so closely so often and trying, you know, and I just tried to always communicate with them what was happening, where we were, you know, why this is important that we succeed, and that was the hardest thing I ever went through in my career.
Well, I can remember the auditors coming down and just spending boatload of time. And Mike was beside himself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was difficult.
Yeah, that was Paul.
Paul.
That was Paul at that time.
Paul, yeah. And I remember him, yeah, Paul. It was a difficult time. But you got through it.
We did.
And now it's, they've already had to renew their leases, so 25 years has come and gone.
Yeah,
And
yeah. It was tough, but I mean, some of the things I was able to do, I mean, I had to really get, you know, they had a directed plan, and one of the things I had to do was once a week I had to go out and go on third shift. But you never get to know the third shift, and I actually got to know those people that worked third shift, and they really liked having somebody come out and see what they were doing. You know, and you just learn that people want to have you see what they're doing and interacting with them, and I mean, it was a bond that we all kind of were together. You know, this is our mission, and we were all part of it. And I remember there was a time when there weren't staff that were leaving. Everybody was. It was like that commitment of everybody together that was great. That was special.
I was honored to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award for the Resource Center, and I commented at the time that during my participation over 40 years, there had only been 3 executive directors in any environment, let alone the healthcare environment. That's remarkable.
All right.
It speaks volumes to the commitment of staff and folks who've stayed that long, and then frankly to have talked to guys like yourself, Diana, Clark, and Marie soon, all who have almost 40 or more than 40 years. That's remarkable. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute it to the mission itself. People are committed to what the Resource Center is doing. Obviously support a board of directors who is, also committed, and, I think that it just, I always loved what I was doing. I mean, you just felt that you were doing something very special, that you were doing something very meaningful.
You knew you were coming in today, you said so. You said, you agreed to show up here voluntarily. And
Yeah,
as you were, as you
I-
were coming in, Mark, and you thought, well, you know, wonder what Greg's gonna ask me, and thinking about it, and what questions haven't I asked you about that I should have?
wow, I stumped me on that one. Well, I think I've been able to get to everything that I, would want to say. It's just, I mean, I always say that, I was fortunate that I found the Resource Center, that it was meant to be, because it just allowed me to do what I love to do. I loved first working with people who, the service recipients, and I loved working with the people that provided those services. I just, I had the experience of working in the group home in IRA. I had the experience of working directly with people receiving services in the day program. And I felt I was able to take that experience, knowing how difficult it could be, how some days you just wouldn't want to show up. It was hard, and I always was able to keep that inside, knowing what the people that I was now supervising and managing were going through. And I'm grateful that I had that direct service experience. I wouldn't have been as good as far as a manager or supervisor, administrator, if I hadn't had that.
I know you're a man of faith, Mark. And how does that faith that you have translate into working with the developmentally disabled?
No, I think it's, service is part of the Christian faith, and, helping others and helping those who aren't able to be independent themselves. That's a major component of. So.
Final question.
Okay.
Final question. You're a golfer.
Yep.
A very good golfer. And also, we've interviewed a guy named Greg Bender,
Yep.
who's a golfer,
Mm-hmm.
and a pretty good golfer.
Yes.
And I assume you've golfed with Greg.
I have golfed with Greg.
Give me your best Greg Bender golf story.
Oh boy, I don't have one.
Oh, no, what a setup. I set that question up so perfectly.
I don't have one. And we golf together, not really that often, but I really can't think of one. Sorry.
That is so disappointing. So disappointing.
I did so well until
that. You did so well.
I did
up to
so
that
well
point.
until the last.
I was going to call Bender and says, "We got you, buddy. We got you."
Yeah, I don't. I know he's far better. He's a great golfer. He's a better golfer than I am. So I was always like, kind of watching him, kind of in awe of how good a golfer he was.
Well, we talked about the fact, one of the things we did talk about, and you wouldn't mind me talking about it, is, obviously he's a polio victim, and a guy who's taken on and responded to the adversity of having that part of his growing up, and to have accomplished so much as an athlete, aside from his professional career, but just as an athlete with that condition. And that's really much that can be accomplished through a disability. I mean, this is what you do as a mission at the Resource Center. These are people who have some form of disability. Some of it's, hence the broad term of developmental disability. So, in Greg, in a sense, he's a model of that.
Yep. So yeah, that's true.
He wouldn't say that, but it's my observation of
Yep.
him. Steve, what would you like to know about Mark that we need to know?
I know a lot about Mark, but,
Yeah.
you know, Mark, you alluded to the fact you started off at the direct care level and worked your way up to
Right.
a leadership position. I think a lot of the staff who are in the union appreciate that you have that perspective, but maybe talk a little bit about, you know, the importance of the direct support professionals, because without them, the resource center isn't what we are.
Right, right. Yeah, I've always said, what the Resource Center is about is really those interactions. You know, each day, each hour, those interactions between the direct support staff and the people they're caring for. So if that's not right, you can have the best policy procedure in the world. You could look from the outside like the best agency there is, but if those interactions aren't what they should be, you know, aren't appropriate, then you don't have a good agency. You don't have a good program. That's what everything that we do, as far as the management, should be to create the best environment for that to happen. Mm-hmm. It's upon us to provide the environment where those interactions can be successful and be what they should. And if we don't create that environment, then we're not doing our job. So.
And Mark, you know, the Resource Center has brought dozens and dozens of people from the institutions, you know, 35, 40 years ago to come and be with us. Mm-hmm. And some of those people are still with us, some have passed, but I've heard you talk before about how their lives have improved from when they came to here as if they had stayed to where they were. And if you would just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I always, you know, I mentioned the new staff coming in when I was doing a training at the Resource Center is really responsible for closing 2 institutions, J.N. Adams Developmental Center, which the people, Foot Avenue, were people that lived at J.N. Adams Development Center, and you know, and Willowbrook. So I recall at Chandler Street when we opened, and that was kind of a behavioral challenge unit, and so Carmen Taylor was our cook there. So she, at the start when it was open, so,
Yeah, wow.
you know, when we had a table for, she prepared a nice lunch, but it was kind of a disaster because everybody was grabbing for food, and the reason is in the institution, they probably didn't have a meal that was set before them that they could take their time and make sure they were going to get food. So we learned that we set, you know, you used a rec room as another dining room until the point that everybody knew that they were going to get their food and they were going to have the time to eat it. But so that was an example.
Yeah.
Of, you know, and I'm sure that the individuals that, you know, came to the Salernay with a medical, you know, would not have lived as long as they lived and would not have had the interactions with the staff and the comfort. I mean, you know that their life was better. So that, and we talked about that. We always, you know, talked to the staff. I mean, you're improving. The people that live here are improving their life.
Sure.
So.
Is there a particular, I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking of Henry Wesley, but I don't know if there's somebody like Henry or somebody else in particular that's really a good example of what you're talking about, of how their life has improved.
Oh, I mean, I look at, there's a couple, when I first started working at the party, there were two gentlemen who shared a room at Frank Wantock, remember Frank? Melvin Pearl? And they were special guys, and I really got to know them, and they just really enjoyed where they were, and the being in a home and getting out in the community, and you could tell that this was special to them. And Melvin passed away, maybe 5-10 years after, but Frank, ended up moving to another home, and whenever I saw Frank, there was like that special, we kind of started, we started together at the Resource Center, so, yeah.
You mentioned Carmen.
Yes,
Wow, that just brought it,
yeah,
because she was the personality at Jones and Gifford. Whenever you went to the cafeteria, there
Yep.
she was. She was bigger than life. What do you remember about her?
she made that transfer from the Jones and Gifford kids, because, she did her job. She seemed to enjoy being there with the individual people that live in there, and she did a good job.
Did you get involved in the bingo at all? Did
I
you?
actually did for a little while. 'Cause I worked in the day program with Sandy Kleinfeld,
Yeah.
and she talked me into being the co-chair of bingo for I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 years. And then when I left to go to the ICF, that ended. But yeah, I had a couple year experience as co-chair with Sandy, even though she really was. We know she really was in charge.
Sandy, yeah. We'll talk about her. She was another force of nature.
She was.
Yeah.
She was. I was supervising. I supervised her, which, she was the one who loved what she did, definitely. She was very passionate. Sometimes I had to tell her to go about things different, and she didn't like it at first, but then she would come back and say, "You know what? You were right," which was good. She would admit that. So yeah, she's still a friend. She's.
Bingo, for those on the camera, it was held at the Jones and Gifford in the dining area.
Yep.
I forget what night it was. Was it like a
Thursday, I believe.
Thursday night?
Yeah.
And that went on for years.
Mm-hmm.
I assume it's not still, pandemic aside, but
No.
we ended
Steve
up-
knows more about it.
Yeah, at some point it did end there.
I think '04 is when we stopped it, but we had to stop it because we were getting ready to renovate what was going to be named the Michael J. Raymond Center, but doing extensive renovations to the building on Jones and Gifford Avenue. So.
But that was a kind of a real funding source at some point.
They would net, and there were some years, and they were netting $50,000 or $60,000 a year, which bought a lot of stuff that we didn't have money for otherwise.
Yeah. From your perspective, did you work much with the allied industries?
No.
Residents probably didn't have.
No,
Much
not much there. No.
Yeah. Well, Mark, this has been spectacular.
Good.
Thank you for coming in.
Sure.
And when you think about that Greg Bender story, and I see you in church, I want you to tell me.
All right.
'Cause you will.
I'll probably come up with something.
Yeah, you'll come up and I'll take my phone out and I'll get that.
Well, I do remember there was some. Now, this is not in the Resource Center, but there was a tournament at Jackson Valley, and he was, I think he was in a playoff for this. I don't know if it was a club champion or something. And I remember it's the number 1 hole there. It's a par 5, and it's fairly long. And he just took a wood, his second shot, and just blistered that. I think put it like right up on the green, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing. So there you go. I got you.
Got a story. Good deal. It's a good one. Greg, you should appreciate this. This is not what I was looking for, but it was a good one, yeah. Well, thank you again.
Yep. You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Glad to.